In a galaxy where wars broke out every other Tong's Day, oftentimes controlling the flow of medical supplies could make or break your enemy's war effort. Historically, that's why both the Republic and its enemies of old, such as the true Sith Empire, fought over control of the galaxy's Kolto supplies. Later, when Kolto was replaced by the much more efficient Bacta, it didn't take long for the latest galactic conflict to target its source in a bid to control this life-giving substance. In today's video, we'll be covering the Bacta Wars, a series of skirmishes in the grander scheme of the post-Endor galactic civil war immediately following the liberation of Coruscant.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Now, as many of you already know, Bacta was a pretty big deal. It was what kept Darth Vader alive, after all, despite the injuries he'd sustained. Unlike Kolto, which was a liquid found naturally in the deepest ocean chasms of the ocean world of Manaan, Bacta had been invented by the Veratics on the mid-rim planet of Thyferra. It was an organic chemical substance used to promote rapid wound healing while preventing scar tissue formation. To make it, one had to combine gelatinous white algae and cayenne bacterial particles, and the fluid that resulted from this amalgamation was further mixed with a viscous liquid known as embori. After its invention, Bacta soon replaced Kolto as the galaxy's go-to medical fluid, which naturally made it incredibly valuable to every faction. To set the stage, let's time travel to a long time ago, to 7 ABY. The Alliance to Restore the Republic has recently declared itself as the New Republic and retaken Coruscant. While the New Republic forces were closing in on the Imperial remnants on Coruscant, the Imperial warlords began to fight amongst themselves. One of these powerful figures was Yusan Isard, who had declared herself Empress, then released a virus known as the Krytos virus on the streets of the galactic capital. This virus targeted non-humans, and her aim was to spread dissent and spark outrage, causing more havoc in the streets. After the Republic took the planet, she escaped in her super star destroyer, the Lusankya. Watching the New Republic slowly but surely claiming more ground in its eradication of Imperial remnants, Isard decided to target the only source of Bacta in the galaxy, knowing that taking control of this unique resource would cripple the New Republic war effort. At the time, Thyferra was already in upheaval. Ever since its invention, two corporations had manufactured Bacta, the Thyferra Corporation and the Zoltan Corporation. However, with Isard's arrival and cooperation with Thyferra, the company was able to monopolize Bacta production, pushing Zoltan out of the market. Isard was granted the rank of Thyferra's COO, and former Moff Fliri Voru was promoted to the company's CFO. An additional player was Irisi Dlarit, who had once been a member of Rogue Squadron before exposing herself as an Imperial mole, defecting and now finding her way to a leadership position on the Thyferran Home Defense Corps. Of course, the New Republic had to do something, not just to regain access to Bacta, but also to take down the self-proclaimed Empress. At least, you'd think. Instead, the New Republic's response came in an unusual form. Rogue Squadron, who agreed that this was an immediate priority, was ready to jump on the mission and bring Isard to justice. The mission to Thyferra coincided with one of their members, Koran Horn's own personal mission, freeing the famous rebel general Jan Dodna from Imperial custody, as he had last been reported a prisoner on the Lusankya. The New Republic, however, did not agree. Command was so hyper-fixated on the Zinj campaign that they rejected Rogue Squadron's request to take the mission. Rogue Squadron, in turn, was rather upset at this and reacted very reasonably by resigning en masse from their positions, save for Pash Kraken, who was instructed by the squadron to remain behind so that he could quash any rumors that might surface about their mission to Thyferra being authorized. After the Rogues' resignation, Pash Kraken resumed his previous position as an A-Wing captain and participated in a mission to a space station above Yagdul. His objective was to destroy the station, but instead, he handed it over to Antilles and his former squadmates, who made it into their new base of operations. Meanwhile, the New Republic was scrambling to put together a new Rogue Squadron, since it was such an integral and symbolic part of its military might, they couldn't afford to lose it. Unluckily for them, however, all the support staff also resigned, taking the Rogues' former equipment with them, including their X-Wings. With a few scouting missions and plenty of generous donations, the newly rogue Rogues not only had all of their starfighters, but enough parts to manage them, supplies, and even a squad of Twi'lek pilots in Shirdaki fighters as support. They also managed to form an alliance with the Ashern, a resistance group on Thyferra against the Veratic species, as well as one of the remnants of the Zaltzin Corporation that wanted to get back at Thyferra. And with that, the stage was set for the brief but important Bacta Wars. The beginning of the Bacta Wars was small, with minor terrorist ground attacks from the resistance groups. From the air, Rogue Squadron attacked Thyferra convoys and refineries, stealing back Bacta, which they either sold to finance their vendetta or gifted to the New Republic. In retaliation, Isard killed an entire colony that had accepted the Rogues' gift of stolen Bacta, hoping to dissuade them. Rogue Squadron launched a series of raids that destroyed several of Isard's Star Destroyers, and they even managed to convince the crew of the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Avarice to defect, but this was only the beginning of their 4-stage plan to win the war. In Phase 1, Antilles intentionally let the location of their space station HQ leak to the enemy, drawing Isard's forces towards Yagdul. Isard immediately took the bait, dispatching the Lusankya and the Virulence to destroy their base of operations. Rogue Squadron was at the ready, so that the second the Lusankya dropped out of hyperspace, they jumped to Thyferra. The forces they left behind were ready to deal with them, deploying the station's heavy-duty tractor beams and a gravity well to trap Lusankya. Once it was trapped, they fired 300 proton torpedoes, which was a bluff, but the Imperials didn't know that. To protect the Lusankya, the Virulence got in between them, breaking the Star Destroyer free of the tractor beam. The Imperials were about to retreat when Captain Kraken's squadron arrived on the scene, which prompted the Virulence to surrender. Unfortunately, the Lusankya had managed to escape, but at least her fighters had been left behind and taken into custody, and the Battle of Yagdul was decided in the Rogues' favour. While that was happening above Yagdul, Rogue Squadron had arrived above Thyferra and began to duel it out with the Thyferran Home Defense Corps. Mid-battle, the Lusankya returned, pursued by the Valiant and the Freedom, which quickly engaged her. This was Phase 2. Phase 3 was taking place concurrently on the ground. With the space battle raging above Thyferra, Elskol Loro and Yelawessery led a joint team made up of the two resistance groups the Rogues had recruited to storm Isard's palace. They were able to enter the building, which drove Isard to attempt another escape. In a feint, she took Voru's personal shuttle, leaving him behind to be captured while she escaped. Aboard the fleeting ship, she ordered the Lusankya to cover her escape, which triggered the final phase of the plan, winning the battle. At this time, things weren't going so well for the rebels. The Freedom had sustained heavy damage, and Rogue Squadron were out of missiles. However, Imperial arrogance reared its ugly head once more, condemning Isard and her forces to defeat. Captain Dryso, the Lusankya's commander, decided to disobey the orders to flee, convinced he could take the struggling rebel ships. Shortly thereafter, when the Virulence returned, he was convinced reinforcements had arrived and they were about to win. What Dryso didn't know, however, was that the Virulence had surrendered, and the New Republic had commandeered the ship, staffed it with their own men, and sent it to back up Rogue Squadron. Captain Kraken's squadron was also on the scene, and with these new reinforcements, the Lusankya was toast. In a last-ditch effort to spite the New Republic, Dryso attempted to ram the Star Destroyer into the planet, but he was assassinated by his own lieutenant, who promptly took command of the vessel and surrendered. Meanwhile, equally importantly, Isard's shuttle had exited the atmosphere, but Koran Horn took her on and shot her down before she could jump to hyperspace. With Isard presumed dead and the Imperial forces routed from Thyferra, there was a lot to celebrate. Thyferra Corporation was disbanded, leaving the Zaltzin Corporation as the sole Bacta manufacturer. Meanwhile, the Rogues discovered their resignations had been mysteriously misfiled, which meant their victory above Thyferra was officially a New Republic victory. They were all invited to rejoin the Navy off the record, which they all accepted. However, despite the New Republic victory in the Bacta Wars, much had been lost. Thousands had died due to the Bacta embargo, many had died during the battles, And worst of all, Isard had never really boarded that shuttle, instead using it as a feint to slip away in secret. She would lie low for years to come, at least until the Thrawn campaign was in full swing. But for the time being, the New Republic had won. Bacta was once more available to its medics, and the fight against tyranny continued. So, what do you think? Do you think Rogue Squadron made the smart choice in rejoining the New Republic Navy and sweeping those resignations under the rug? Or should they have made a bigger stink out of everything? Are there any other obscure conflicts you'd like us to cover? Let us know all that and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.